The hotel where I work as an administrator is located in a picturesque suburb. This is a rather old stone building of 3 floors, but on the third floor there is an attic where all sorts of old rubbish lies. There are not many rooms. They are all made in an antique style. In general, a very beautiful place. That evening, I came to work. We work in shifts. My replacement handed over all matters to me and reported that the guests had all moved out. It was quite strange. Before, there was always someone in the hotel. In my memory, it had never been empty. In the evening, the cleaning lady went home. The security guard called back and said that he was sick and would not be able to go to work. It turned out that I would have to spend the night in the hotel alone. And it's not that it scared me at that moment, but nevertheless I felt uneasy. I called all my friends, but no one could get out of the house to be with me. At 11 o'clock in the evening, I walked around the territory, checked all the entrances and exits. She closed the front and back entrances and went to her staff room. This is a fairly large room, a studio with its own shower and toilet. There is a security area in one corner. There are monitors from surveillance cameras located around the perimeter of the building, as well as on both floors in the corridors. There are no cameras in the rooms for obvious reasons. I took my book and sat down on the sofa by the window to wait for the guests. I must say that the rooms have telephones for contacting the administrator, and on my desk there was a multi-line telephone where the numbers were signed. I read for about an hour, delving into the interesting plot of the book. The time had already passed midnight, and there were still no guests. There was complete silence at the Strashno.com hotel. Suddenly I heard a child crying. What nonsense! Where can a child come from here? Maybe I'm already buggy. I carefully walked out into the first-floor corridor. The sound clearly came from somewhere above. If we talk about my condition at that moment, my legs were soft like cotton wool, and goosebumps ran down the back of my head. I thought that the cat somehow got into the living room and got stuck somewhere. I went up to the second floor. The sound was still coming from above. I was struck by the thought that the sound was coming from the attic on the third floor. There is not even light installed there, but you still have to go. Suddenly, the cat needs help. I consoled myself with the thought of an animal. But to be honest, this voice didn't sound like meowing, more like crying. Such quiet sobs. I went to the utility room to get a lantern and went upstairs. Gathering my Strashno.com strength into a fist, I unlocked the door and entered the room. The crying, now more like a rustling and creaking sound, came from the far corner of the attic. I aimed the flashlight there. And I didn't see anything. Telling myself not to be afraid, I headed there. And I saw an old record player near the beam. The record was spinning in it, and it was she who made these sounds, because the needle did not move in a circle as it should, but either fell into place or jumped off the record in different places. I felt just indescribably scared, just wild. There's someone here. Someone started this device? I began to circle the entire attic with a lantern. It seems like no one... But how? I personally just unlocked the door to the third floor. Rushing back, I tripped and sprawled on the dirty floor. She jumped up, rushed to the door, slammed it, and pressed her back against it. What is Strashno.com? My God! I whispered a prayer, asking that everything would work out. She went down to her room and locked the door from the inside. What to do? Call the police? The replacement? To my husband? Thoughts were racing in my head. Suddenly the silence was broken by the ringing of the phone. I rushed to him. Finally! At least someone is calling. Running up to the table, I froze in my tracks. The phone was ringing, yes, but the call was from inside the hotel, from room 8, as indicated by the light burning opposite the number. She carefully picked up the phone. Silence. I hung up on the phone and rushed to the monitors from the surveillance cameras. So, the second floor. The door to room 8 was slightly open, although I definitely closed everything when I walked around. The windows are closed. There is no draft. The air conditioners are on. I really felt like I was going gray. I was overcome with incredible horror. I sat like that, staring at the monitor for about an hour, maybe 1.5. Nothing happened. I didn't notice at what moment the sound Strashno.com coming from the attic stopped. The phone didn't ring. I picked up the phone, deciding to call my husband after all. But there was no signal. I took my mobile phone. There was no antenna either. With some kind of indifference, I turned my gaze to the monitor of the cameras on the second floor and saw that the door to room 8 had closed by itself, but then it opened slightly in the 7th. I strained all my vision, trying to see at least a shadow from someone, but I saw nothing. But the wooden staircase from the second floor to the first creaked. My teeth were knocking out fractions. Someone was coming down. I checked if my door was closed, propped the handle with a chair, and, hugging my knees, froze in the chair, looking intently at the crack of light under the door. Nothing happened. The adrenaline in my blood went through the roof. A little more and I would have rushed to climb out the window. I tried to find some rational solution, Strashno.com, but there was a ringing emptiness in my head. There was no one on the monitors, but the stairs still creaked. This happened when particularly overweight and slow guests went down it. I looked at the door. The round handle on it began to turn slowly. I began to read prayers out loud. I shouted, "Go away!" Crossed myself, but could not budge. Everything stopped. I glanced at the monitor. All the doors on the second floor were closed. Looking out the window, it was getting light. After that night, I took a vacation, went to church, prayed, took communion, and confessed. I went to work, but since then I have never been alone in a hotel. Someone was always with me. What happened then, what that entity was, I don't know. The only reminder of what I have experienced are the gray hairs on my head. In 1981, a dance was taking place at the Hyatt Regency Hotel at Kansas City, and more than 1,000 people came to participate and watch the dance. The dance took place in the lobby of the hotel, so many spectators and viewers watched this dance from the second, third, and fourth floor walkways suspended directly above. Just before the event, the walkways had been slightly altered from their original design. A small change caused an increase of the stress on load-bearing rods, which could barely support the weight of the walkways themselves, not to mention the added weight of all the viewers. The tragedy occurred when the fourth-floor walkway collapsed, taking with it the second-floor walkway with it on its was down. Rescue operation of this tragedy continued more than 14 hours, and those who had been injured so badly that there was no hope for them to survive were told that they were going to die and were given morphine for their pains. Many of the people who died had to be dismembered in order to provide access to other people who were still alive and needed help, yet got trapped in the wreckage. A total of 114 people found their death in the disaster and tragedy that happened, which made it the deadliest structural collapse in the history of America, that is, until the tragedy of the Twin Towers. People who participated in the rescue operation remained traumatized long after the event itself. This is the story about a murder in a top London hotel in 2010 when Saud Abdulaziz bin Nasser Al Saud, Saudi Arabian prince, violently murdered his male submissive slave. This gruesome murder involved a sexual element, but the prince denied this over and over again. Bandar Abdulaziz, the guy who was murdered, had bite marks on his cheeks and also evidence of bites on his ears. Some of these marks occurred prior to the murder, and dental patterns of the bites matched the teeth of the price. The bites were believed to have happened during sadistic sexual situations between the two, as this weird relationship of master and slave had been happening for quite some time. The prince was jailed for life despite being very wealthy, connected and of royal blood after his diplomatic immunity was denied. There was always the possibility of being decapitated if he would have admitted for his homosexuality, because even today, homosexuality remains a capital offense in Saudi Arabia. On March 1, 1909, a man who called himself Dr. George D. Pullman checked into the Savoy Hotel, London. His appearance at the hotel was with fine clothes. He spoke in an American accent and ordered a whole suite of rooms that he never intended to pay for. So far, strange enough. The staff of the hotel was very impressed by the man's claim that his wife and maid were following in a motor car, and nobody questioned his words and authenticity. Pullman then asked reception if there was a place anywhere nearby where he will be able to purchase automobile tires, which also indicated about his financial status and wealth at the time. What actually happened was Pullman walking into a jeweler's shop in the Burlington Arcade and asked to view a range of diamond rings as well as an expensive diamond collar necklet. Pullman asked the jeweler to send the rings to the Savoy Hotel in order for his wife to inspect them. As Pullman was about to leave the jeweler's store, he suddenly changed his mind. At that moment, he turned back and told the jeweler to send the necklet as well, but also asked to reduce the price by removing 3 diamond drops that were attached to it. When Pullman left the store, the assistant manager followed him to the hotel, bringing all the jewelry with him. Just like the hotel staff, the assistant manager was also deceived by Pullman's grand impression. He delivered the jewels and decided to wait in the sitting room of the hotel suite while Pullman went through to another room where his wife was supposedly dressing. Pullman took 5 rings with him and left the door slightly open. The assistant manager of the store heard Pullman speaking and the voice of a woman responding to his words. When Pullman returned to meet the assistant manager, he said that his wife liked the rings and would now like to see the necklet. Again, Pullman went through to the other room with the necklet, only this time he decided to close the door. At this point, the assistant manager became suspicious when he stopped hearing voices, as now there was no man or woman talking from behind the closed door. So, he went into the corridor and waited for Pullman. Only a few seconds later, someone wearing a soft cap and heavy overcoat emerged from the adjacent room. This man was actually Pullman in disguise with no wife to be seen. His con to steal the jewels failed and he was caught at the spot red-handed. Pullman then tried to fake distress and told the assistant manager to call a maid because his wife had suddenly fallen ill, but at this point, the jeweler was not deceived. They got into a fight at which at the end of it Pullman surrendered and returned 4 of the 5 rings. Pullman was lying on the floor and begging that the assistant manager would release him, but he kept standing in the doorway and waited for help to arrive. This version was true according to our hero, the assistant manager, as no one else witnessed the events except Pullman and the assistant manager. The story got a weird turn when, according to the assistant manager Pullman, who tried to con him and the store produced a razor from his pocket and simply slit open his own throat. At this point, again, according to the assistant manager, he ran to get help, but when he returned with a porter, Pullman was gone. Pullman, however, did leave a trail of blood that could be followed. He climbed out onto the balcony and then down a spiral staircase. Because of his heavy loss of blood, by the time he had reached the bottom, he was very exhausted. At the coroner's inquest, there were some questions arising as for Pullman's razor. Did the razor really come from Pullman's pocket? The coroner asked the assistant manager if he ever carried some sort of weapons or knives with him, to which he denied. Still, this story remains weird. From the request of a perfect stranger to follow him to the hotel with extremely expensive jewelry, all the way to an assistant manager following him with the precious jewels, yet without any defense measurements or weapons in case of a possible robbery, which almost took place at that hotel. In 1931, George R. Sanders, 40 years old, decided to check into the Dixie Hotel in Manhattan. Sanders decided to end his life, and he thought the hotel was a good enough place for this reason. And so, Sanders got a room high enough on the 7th floor, but a bit later changed his mind and asked for a room on the 14th floor. Better safe than sorry, right? Sanders was thoughtful as well, as he left a note for police, stating that the cause of death is suicide, and the reason for it was mental depression. Sanders also directed police to letters for safe boxes and other papers in the top bureau drawer on the right side at his home, and asked that his instructions were carried out. Sanders had everything planned, except one small yet crucial thing that did not go as planned. He did not consider where he would land after jumping from the window of his room. George Sanders leaped from the window and into his death, but instead, he crashed through the roof of an adjacent restaurant and landed right at the feet of a horrified dining couple and the restaurant's night manager. You can call it irony that such a considerate and organized man would end his life in such a scary, horrible, and messy way. What a way to go! In 2012, two Canadian sisters that stayed at a hotel on the Thai resort of Phi Phi Island died under mysterious circumstances. The bodies of the two sisters were found huddled in their beds with bleeding gums, blue lips, and discolored fingernails and toenails. There were lesions all over their skin and the room was full of vomit. The sisters had already been dead for some time, and the last time they were seen was on June 13th. When the two returned from a bar. They had stayed in their room until a maid entered the room 2 days later on the 15th, using a master key, when she discovered the horror in front of her. It is believed that the two young sisters had been poisoned, and initial autopsy reports from Thailand indicated serious food poisoning. A little bit later, a Canadian coroner quashed the theory that the insecticide DET had poisoned the women, and claimed that the amount of DET in the bodies wasn't high enough to cause the two any harm. In 2009, two other young women, an American and a Norwegian, found their deaths under similar circumstances at the same island and at same resort. Their death was mysterious as well. Several more deaths had been reported, with suspicion of poisoning as well, yet the true cause of these deaths never determined. Another case of suspicious deaths had occurred some time later in the northern Thai city of Chiang Mai, where several people from different countries that stayed at the same hotel had possibly been killed by exposure to chlorpyrifos, which is a chemical spray that is being used to kill bedbugs. There's a theory suggesting that all this may actually be a cover-up on the part of Thai authorities who fear harm to Thailand's tourism trade. 3 months later, Thai police decided to close the case of the deaths of the two Canadian sisters. There are places with such dark energy that every knowledgeable person will advise you 3 times to avoid them. But this only makes it more interesting, and with terrible force it pulls you to go, look, explore. The Cecil Hotel in the United States of America is one such place. At first glance, the unremarkable building became a den of maniacs and criminals. People committed suicide there, and the corpses of people who died under unclear circumstances were found there. Cecil is so overgrown with legends that it has become part of popular culture. Elisa Lam, 21 years old, when she traveled from her home in Vancouver to check into the infamous Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles in early 2013. She was suffering from bipolar disorder, and the last time that she was seen was on hotel CCTV footage, behaving very strange and out of the ordinary inside the hotel's elevator. She was pressing several buttons and running in and out of the elevator. Elisa Lam was found inside a 1.2 by 2.4 meter, 2x8 ft, cylindrical metal water tanks on the roof of the hotel, with mysteries surrounding her death. Her body, which was decomposing by now, was discovered only weeks later when guests of the hotel started complaining of low water pressure. Creepy as it sounds, it seems that the guests had been drinking, cleaning their teeth and showering with the same tank water where the body of Elisa Lam was this entire time. Investigation determined she died by drowning inside the water tank, but did not offer any explanation as to how Elisa got into the tank in the first place. The doors and stairs that lead to the hotel's roof are locked, and only the staff has the passcodes and keys. Also, any attempt to force these doors would supposedly have triggered an alarm. However, she could have reached hotel's roof using the fire escape, if she, or someone who might have accompanied her there, had known. If that's not enough, the same time that Elisa Lam found her death, an outbreak of tuberculosis started spreading through downtown Los Angeles. Health authorities urged citizens to get tested, and this tuberculosis test was later named the Lam-Elisa test. Various theories arose about Lam's strange behavior in the elevator. Some claimed that she was attempting to hide from a pursuer, perhaps someone ultimately responsible for her death, while others claimed that Lam was frustrated with the elevator's apparent malfunction. Other theories talk about her being under the influence of illicit drugs, or that she might have taken rare cocktails of such drugs that a normal screen would not detect. Even the coroner's pathologists appeared to be ambivalent about their conclusion that Lam's death was accidental. At one point, the accident box was checked in the report, while only 3 days later, the undetermined box was checked instead. And so, the mystery as to what happened to Elisa Lam remains.